welcome everybody to the last talk of this Planted Unearthed series at Planted Country, Stourhead. My name's Sam Peters, I'm one of the co-founders of Planted, and in our latest series of talks we've been titled Cool Design Sustainable Futures. We've been exploring how we design places, spaces and systems which mitigate against the twin threats of human-induced climate breakdown and biodiversity decline. And we're closing out this series with a talk entitled The Rise of B-Corp. With a growing movement of purpose-driven businesses, so-called purpose-driven businesses, and organisations established not simply with the aim of making profit, but also to help people and planet, what role can B Corp certification play in driving up standards of accountability, transparency, and social responsibility? What is B Corp, and what is the purpose? What does purpose-driven actually mean? And what motivates people who run businesses which care about their environment and social impact? And to answer these questions, I've got three fantastic panellists to welcome on stage today to describe their own B Corp experience and the journeys they've been on, talk about some of the businesses that have inspired them, and just what it is about B Corp that they find so appealing enough to actually put their businesses through what is essentially a very rigorous process to achieve that certification. So first of all, to my left, welcome to Catherine Coward of The Good Crowd, and to Catherine's left in the middle there, Mark Tremlett of Naturalmat, and on the far side, Jordan Tomkins of PYTCH. Thank you guys all for being here today. It's an absolute privilege to have you on the stage with us. So why don't we start off by each of you telling us a little bit about your experience of B Corp and why you've been invited onto the panel today. Catherine, can we start with you perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Catherine. So I would describe myself as a food and nature lover, definitely. And I've worked in the food and drink world for 25 years. And I guess I spent, in all honesty, probably the first 15 years of that time working on innovation projects, working in supply chain projects, and the environment and sustainability was not even a conversation. It was never in the boardroom. I was in the boardroom frequently and it was just not a topic. And I just felt really frustrated and uninspired by that kind of career, I guess, that I had. And then 5 years ago, I had the privilege of working on a project at Pucker Herbs, which a lot of you will know, and they were a pretty founding B Corp, actually. And what really impressed and inspired me was the rigour that they had gone to really look through their supply chain. So organic, all of their products and ingredients were organic. I'm a big passionate fan of organic, did my dissertation on organic farming back in 1999 when I don't think my lecturers even knew what organic was, and was massively inspired by the diligence, the rigour and the thoroughness by which they looked into their supply chain and really kind of walked the talk, if you like. So that was my introduction to B Corp, and then since then I've been on a journey of working with a lot of food and drink, but increasingly other businesses as well, to help them to improve their sustainability, their impact across people and planet. And then, with Pucker, I found B Corp, and I just thought this is this thing that kind of gives a framework and makes it achievable and gives it a something that businesses can really work with.
Thanks, Catherine. Mark, I think Naturalmat were one of the very first businesses Planted were keen to work alongside, because you guys have always placed the environment at the centre of the business. Is that fair? But it's only recently that you've gone and achieved B Corp certification. So
that's right. Yes, that's right. So I mean, as a business, we started in 1999, and yes, just when you were doing your dissertation. Yeah. So we set up the business strangely to make mattresses for yachts and motorboats, actually. And but when we set it up, we wanted to use. We worked out that natural materials were the very best things to use, and we set out to use materials that were completely biodegradable, they're recyclable, they're all from sustainable sources. And then the business has grown over the years into lots of other departments. And actually, so making mattresses for yachts is a tiny part of what we do now, maybe not even 1%. But the same sort of principles have sort of remained to the company. So, and then we have, and we were a very lonely voice back in 1999. We were talking about the benefits of using natural fibres and how it was much, for your health and wellness and all these other great benefits you'd get from using naturals and using organics. And no one really paid any attention. It was really you're preaching to very much the unconverted, which is very difficult for a very long time. luckily the market has changed. So now 23 years later, people understand exactly what you're talking about and exactly what you're trying to achieve. So it's very encouraging now that we are now, we're talking to like-minded people. And our journey, so we've been doing sort of green eco business practices and materials since when we started, and we started looking at at award. We never sort of thought, oh, we don't need it. We originally thought, oh, why have awards? Why have benchmarks? And then somebody I know, they won the Queen's Award for Sustainable Business. Obviously now it's called the King's Award, but then Queen's Award for Sustainable Business. And I remember thinking, okay, well, going around trade shows and seeing that logo and thinking, gosh, well, that's actually really powerful, that logo. So we should try. So we applied and we won that first time round, which we were very pleased to do. And we won it in the dark days of April 2020. So that was a really very nice that was a bit of a ray of light for us. And then we started thinking, okay, well, awards can be really beneficial, and so we looked at, and we wanted to have something else which was something which sort of represented who we were. And there's quite a lot of choice, really, when you look at these different badges that exist out there that quite a lot of companies put on their adverts and as part of their supports to their business. And we basically realized that B-Corp was really the only award that had real teeth. It's the only one that you really had to look very closely at everything you did, not only as part of your product, but everything that your business touches. And the rigor and the scrutiny with which is required is what tempted us and persuaded us that really, if you are going to try and have some sort of ethical standard, B-Corp is really the only one to go for. So, and we looked at other companies, and actually Pucker was one of the ones we looked at. Always been a great fan of Pucker. I think they're fantastic. And also Finisterre, another West Country business, and always been very, these are businesses that we really respect, and so think, oh, well, if they've done it, then it must be, that's a very good model for us. Anyway,
thanks, Mark. Well, I was just going to ask you later on some of the businesses that kind of inspired you and got you into the process. So we've already gone there already, but we can revisit that because I think that's a really interesting topic, the kind of best practice out there. But Jordan, you guys, PYTCH achieved B-Corp certification in the last few months. What were the reasons that got you to put your business through this rigorous process that Mark's described?
Yeah, so ours is a little bit of a different approach and a different story, I guess. We were a long-established business in the events industry, and events can be quite superficial, I guess. And there was a little bit of that sort of piece missing from what we were doing, and we sort of started thinking, well, is there a way we can use this business for more than just, putting on parties for rich people and business people talking about themselves? So we started to sort of look at what we could do, and it was a bit of a scattergun approach to start off with. And then we sort of thought, well, we're not really getting anywhere. How do we do this properly? And we were looking at ISOs and things like that, and all the different marks that people get, and they all seemed, again, a little bit superficial. And like Mark says, then B-Corp sort of appeared on our radar and was the only one with some real sort of foundation and teeth to it. So we initially used that as our kind of to-do list almost. We got the impact assessment and looked through it and went, well, we're way off on all of this stuff, but if we can just start to do a few of these things, then perhaps we can turn this business into a bit more. And then as we were doing that, suddenly we realized it was about more than that, and we needed to reposition the business almost from the ground up, which luckily that was early 2020 when we had that realization and we had the perfect opportunity to do so. And so what we ended up doing was rebuilding the business as a B Corp from the bottom almost, really.
That period in early 2020 around the pandemic has seen a real surge. That was certainly when Planted also had the time to start on our journey. We're in the process of gaining, or hopefully gaining, certification. But it takes a lot of work, doesn't it, Catherine? You work with businesses to help them on that application process. Can you talk a little bit about what's involved? What does it entail if there are people in the audience now who've got a business and thinking, this is something that would be really appealing to us? What's actually involved?
Yeah. So there's two key things. So you mentioned, Jordan, the impact assessment. So that's the big piece of work to do. So you will get about 200 questions, and it will look across your whole business. It will look at, it's all focused on people and planet alongside profit. So it's for profit, it's for business, not charity. And it will look at how you look after your employees. It will look at your interaction with the community. It will look at your environmental metrics, particularly around wastewater and energy use. And it will look at your governance structures. So it really does, as you said, Mark, look across the whole of your business. And that's why I kind of really liked it and thought, I think this is the gold standard at the moment. There are other certifications that might look at your environmental impact, your impact in terms of people, but something that looks across the whole piece. So you will spend a long time on about 200 questions. And then the other really key thing that makes it quite unique is that businesses are, you have to change your legal articles of association. So your legal articles to say that you will consider not just shareholders within your decision making, you will also consider your decisions and the impact of those decisions on your stakeholders, and stakeholders being your employees, your customers, your suppliers, and the community that you interact with. So that's quite a unique thing, and can be challenging for businesses with a sort of complex ownership structure. Increasingly businesses are looking at it quite early, actually, and I'm having lots of conversations with small, ambitious, purpose-led businesses who really see it as a great way of setting their business up right from the off. So getting a frame, and you mentioned it's you get these 200 questions, but actually, yes, they're asking you questions, but they're also giving you ideas and thoughts about how to set up your business in a really ethical way.
And ultimately, you're looking to achieve a certain score, aren't you?
Yes, you are looking to get 80 points.
80
is
points,
the threshold.
isn't it? Yeah.
So I think those 200 questions actually have 200 points within them, and you need to get 80. So it is quite rigorous. It's going to get tougher, actually, because they're doing a big standards review right now, which will come in next year. I think they have identified rightly, I think, that, I think the expectation from all of us as consumers, as people, expect standards like that to get tougher. And so there's been a few, probably little PR things that have cropped up that probably haven't served them very well. And they've really, I think, grabbed that, and they're looking at minimum standards in 10 key areas. So from the end of next year, it's going to get even tougher.
Thanks, Catherine. Mark, going into that, in terms of when you went through the process, were there questions that asked you when you scored really poorly, or things that surprised you, or things that are actually really encouraging, that you were already on the right track? And how was the whole experience of going through it?
The impact assessment, yes, there are 200 questions, but each question is potentially a rabbit hole and a warren.
Another question.
And then another question and another question and another question. So don't just think, it's 200 questions, I'll knock that off in a couple of hours. It is, each question could have as many as other, maybe 30, 40 or other 50 questions that come out of the back of that. And that could be, 20 or 30 other particular processes or practices that you have to engage as a business. So it is time consuming. This is the number one thing. So I would say, just don't underestimate, how much time it takes to achieve the 200 questions. And it's, but the one thing, it's points means prizes. And so, you get, and the impact assessment, you get awarded the points as you answer the questions. Obviously, they're all verified by this organisation called B-Lab at the end of it. So you do the B impact assessment, and B-Lab are the certifying body that verify all your answers. But at least you do get, if you've answered, you've gone with a good answer or a bad answer, and then you get the points. And so it's, it can be seen as sort of quite amusing. So great, I've got, even winning a quarter of 1 point can feel like a really great achievement as part of the assessment, because it is long. But yes, there are questions that, from our perspective, it was quite strange, because environment is one of the biggest sections of there's basically 5 different sections to the impact assessment, and environment is one of the big ones, and that's sort of one of the ones that it's where we've sort of, it's been our forte since we started, and because we've been making sort of a green eco range of products since we started, and they do, they are better for people and planet, sort of fundamentally. So we were quite good on that, but also quite a lot of the questions are designed for, I think, larger organisations, on the basis that you've been some sort of smoke belching industrialist for all your life, and then suddenly you've had a light bulb moment, and you want then to become sort of green, eco, and ethical, and more sustainable and planet loving. But we're not like that. So it was sort of quite strange for us, because asking a lot of questions, assuming we had not done this before. So that was one thing that we found quite strange, because actually we said, well, we've always been doing this, so that's quite normal. But other parts of it, yes, certainly there are questions where, as a manufacturer, also, I think the questionnaires are generally designed on what would be a typical business model in today's world, which is where you have a service or a retailing business that is based in a high cost country. You're sourcing the item from the product. If it's a product, you're sourcing it from a lower cost country, and then you're outsourcing your warehousing and distribution. So it's more about your supply chain, really, rather than your own particular environment and your own particular, your employees as such. If you're we actually make everything. We decided to make everything ourselves, and we do it all in the UK. And as a manufacturer, that's where you actually end up getting more and more questions, because you're the people. You're not just sort of palming it off on your supply chain, which is another part of the assessment. You've got to answer, and you've got to do this and prove that you're doing it all yourselves. And so that does make it harder. So if you're making something, then the process of achieving that impact assessment is harder. And that's but then that was very healthy for us as a business, because it does mean you look at all the different nooks and crannies, and you put in place a very sort of rigorous platform, which is going to have the ultimate ultimate B for benefit, and B stands for benefit for all, and that's really fundamentally what you're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, it's a really interesting point about supply chain, and kind of relates to how actually Jordan and PYTCH and Planted have come together, and why I think we're forming such a happy partnership as well, is because when we started going through it in the very early days, after we'd only run a couple of events, we were really struggling to find suppliers who were doing things the right way. And I think when we came across PYTCH and Johnny Palmer, your founder, it was really great to know that there were AV production companies working in the events industry who were also doing things how we saw as being the right way. And Jordan, I mean, on that, and in terms of sort of changing how difficult it was for you guys who were, as you in your own words, not really set up to be a purpose-driven business, but you were sort of almost retrofitting your business. How many challenges did that kind of present?
Yeah, I think it was quite challenging to start off with. One of the best things, though, as Mark said, is that it's not just environment focused, and that really helped us think about the business holistically. I think if you go off down this path of trying to dial back your carbon and work with all the green suppliers and things like that, that's great, but you're missing a whole point of sustainability, which is the benefit for all piece. And because the B-Corp was set up to be holistic, we could focus on other areas whilst we worked on the bits that weren't doing so well. So we'd come across a question, and it would say, "Oh, your XXX policy, what does that contain?" And you go, "Oh, we haven't got one of those policies. Well, we better write it then." Yeah. And there were all these things that came out of it that helped us. The process was the most rewarding part of the whole thing, really. And just on your point about the manufacturing, that was a real blow for us, because we got through the whole thing as a service business, and then we were sort of saying, oh, and actually we've got this product called SolCell, which you can see over there is powering the stage today, and we use it to power power events and things like that. And they go, oh, you make something. Oh, right. Well, here's 200 more questions then. And your score's actually gone down by 20 points because you make things now, so you've got a bigger impact. And so we had to start all over again and relook at everything again. But again, by redoing that, you get to dial it up again and re-examine all those policies and processes. And so, you said about it being a long process. We were 3 years in the making. And I did that assessment probably about 3 or 4 times by the end of it. But that's the only way that you're going to get the maximum value out of it, is really drilling down into those things.
And we've touched on it's a big commitment for a business to do this, isn't it? So, I mean, how are you able to give any rough idea of how many hours of work you put into this collectively as a company?
I wouldn't even begin to be able to estimate. It's not just my time. So I'm the beekeeper, as I've just found out. B-Lab have told me that's my official title. And yes, I mean, I put days and days and days of work into it. But like you say, there's also the rest of the company that have to get on board, and it has to be embedded culturally. And so you have to spend time with those people, and they have to, sign off on various bits and pieces and agree to these policies and processes. And there's a lot of work involved in that as well.
Catherine, you work very much with sort of local businesses around this area. You're very connected with the business community here. Who are the can you give some examples of some of the businesses that people who are visiting who live in the area might want to go and look at, who've gone through this process, and who are some of those?
Black Bee Honey is a lovely local honey company producer who only work with local UK bees. So they have just certified last week, so that's amazing. So you'll find them locally as well. I mean, I think more sort of broadly around the southwest, then a big business for me that I'm really inspired by is Riverford Organic, that I'm sure we all know of. They're quite a success story. Yeah,
and Black Bee Honey were with us last year, and Riverford Organic have been here today.
Absolutely.
They're at the event, so you can go and see them afterwards.
And
again, great business.
There are other businesses here as well that are working on their B-Corp, I know, but I won't steal their thunder.
Planted being one of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's plenty of businesses, as I mentioned earlier, small businesses, but also some of the big companies are looking at this as well, and different parts of kind of the supply chains of businesses as well. So I think it probably started more from a kind of consumer goods point of view. I mean, for all of us as consumers, you may or may not know, but, if you go to the supermarket and you look for a Pucker Herbs product or a Tony Chocolonely, which is another great one, you will find the bee on the back of their pack. So that's how you identify whether they're a B Corp or not. So, of course, it's been quite attractive for those businesses to be able to, I guess, set themselves apart from their competition, to kind of cut through. So I think that's one of the things that, when I talk to businesses about, well, why did you want to become a B Corp? Cutting through the noise around sustainability. We all know, and we see it, don't we? We see the greenwashing. We see terms like ESG, sustainability, impact all over the place at the moment. And, as a consumer, how do I know, or a business owner that's looking to work with other businesses that are doing things in a better way, how do I know? How do I choose? So I think that, something that is a certified accreditation that allows us to make a choice based on, something that is solid and verified is really helpful. And I think that's why the food and drink brands actually make up about 20-25% of UK B Corps, and why it's become quite a big thing in that community for sure.
It's interesting. And Mark, you described the Queen's Award, the powerful nature of that logo, but then there is a marketing element to this as well, isn't there? I mean,
totally.
You want to separate yourselves.
And I totally agree with what Catherine just said. I mean, it's it provides a consumer with an immediate benchmark, and the more that B Corp is understood by the consumer out there, I think the more it's going to help. I think there was a report recently that only 30% of UK consumers know what B Corp is at the moment. Yeah. So, there's the vast majority don't have a clue about what B Corp is, and they're never going to get to 100%. But, it is a way in which you can just sort of understand immediately. Oh yes, that's the right kind of company that I want to talk to. And we've seen it. We gained accreditation in February, and immediately when you're having conversations, either from we do a certain amount of work with the hospitality industry. We supply quite a lot of beds and mattresses to hotels, and then everybody now is sort of, if any kind of sort of a lot of business relationships now, they say, okay, well, we'll send you our supplier questionnaire, and it's got a raft of different questions, and they're all geared around a sort of a B-Corp sort of theme, basically. But if you just say, actually, well, we are actually B-Corp, then okay, oh well, fine, then almost you've completed the questionnaire, immediately by saying you're B-Corp, because you've already answered all of the questions that they're going to put you. So it has been, immediately we see, I mean, not necessarily tangible benefits, but it definitely moves you to the top of the pile, and it means that you're not greenwashing. There is substance to who you are and what you're doing, and it's been proven.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's quite attractive, isn't it, as well, to employees? So actually attracting and retaining great people and talent in your businesses. Have you found? I mean, you're quite early on, aren't you? But have you found that useful yet?
It definitely. I mean, before we actually started B Corp, we always thought we were a very sort of sustainable business, but more from a product basically driven perspective. And so we went through a sort of sustainability review, and we got in some consultants called 12. You probably come across 12. You probably know 12, yes, because they work with PYTCH. And so we did a whole kind of evaluation of the business, and then so we had our own sort of 5 pillars of our sustainable actions, and B Corp was one of those pillars. But obviously, looking after our community and looking after our employees is obviously always been important. But it made us look more carefully at that, and people do actually, there are more and more people out there who want to work for a business that's going to look after them, care for them. And so we have definitely found, it easier to recruit people once you start down this journey, because they know that actually, you are going to look after them more and provide an environment which is going to be, healthier and better and more rewarding for everybody. So it's definitely it helps on almost every single level.
Jordan, is that something that would chime with you? You've talked in the past about being a lover of sustainable business, but as much as the environmental sustainability aspect, was that the bit that attracted you to B Corp?
Yeah, I think less about, because we're quite a small business. We're just under 30 staff, have been quite stably that size for a couple of years now. And so it's less about attracting new talent for me, and more about giving the people that already work for the business a sustainable job. Because the events industry tends to be a little bit burn and churn. By the time you're all excited about it as a early 20s something, and then by the time you reach your 30s, you're sort of thinking, well, I've had enough of this now, and I want to get into something else. So for me, seeing a lot of other colleagues go through that and exit the industry or the business, I wanted to make sure that we had things that would allow them to keep their jobs and keep the enjoyment of working in the events industry, I guess. So B Corp definitely has elements of that, and really helps you think about the long-term proposition of the jobs.
Said at the start of the conversation that we're going to talk about a few of the businesses that have inspired you guys. We've already mentioned PYTCH, Finisterre. It's definitely one. I'm wearing their T-shirt now, so definitely one that I admire hugely. But can we explore a little bit of who are the leading lights? And I guess it's kind of hard to talk about these kind of purpose-driven businesses without talking a bit about Patagonia and some of those kind of brands. But Catherine, were there early ones apart from PYTCH that you mentioned?
I've got to come back to Riffle Organic for me, because I'm such a passionate organic fan, and I think...
What is it about them?
Yeah, so about them. So they've just become 100% employee-owned as of last week. I think they moved to sort of 80% a couple of years ago. And I think, I've followed their journey for the last 20 years for sure. And I think in terms of, purpose at the heart, for me, they exemplify that entirely. So, it's all about nature and farming in balance.
And a fair deal for their suppliers
And a fair
as well.
deal, yeah, exactly. They they work in a sort of cooperative point of view. So definitely that side of it. And then, of course, the fact that they've now entrusted, or Guy Watson has now entrusted the business to his employees and believes that actually they're going to make better decisions for the future of that business than one man alone, I think is really forward thinking. So that's, for me, definitely.
Yeah, good shout. Mark, what about yourself?
Well, I'm trying. I'd like to say there's other examples in the furniture industry, but I'm slightly struggling. I'm not sure who else is out there. I mean, there are. I mean, again,
I must say, a natural wool that we're sitting
Solid
on.
wool,
I believe
I mean,
solid wools rather.
we've been working with these guys for a while because we do an awful lot with wool, and this is another. I mean, this is another Devon-based business. Seems quite a lot of Devon here because Riverford of Devon. We're Devon.
Good stuff
Solid
coming
wool
out
is
of Devon.
in
and
Devon,
a lot of
they
stuff,
are,
yeah.
They're quite green. I think Cornwall actually has the most per county.
It's really
actually,
interesting, that, isn't it?
But I think Devon is second. Bristol's, I think it's highest as a town. I think almost. Anyway, very closely
Southwest
behind. Anyway, Southwest are up there. So I don't know. Maybe there's something in the water. But no. Again, Finisterre, I think, have been out there. I've always been a fan of sort of Patagonia as well. But Patagonia, I don't think are B-Corp, are they?
They are,
B-Corp?
yeah.
They are B-Corp?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, they are. Anyway.
And what was it about
often-
Patagonia that you liked?
Patagonia have always been out there as a sort of force for good. They're really, they're a sort of almost a sort of they're almost a contradiction in terms. They're a hugely successful commercial operation that basically, and they're basically, but trying not to be commercial and trying actually to send out a message about how to sort of live a purposeful sort of life. As much as, or probably more than actually, then please buy this T-shirt or jacket or whatever. So, and actually, they talk about, if you look at their website, they talk about activism, and that is sort of like almost like the next step. We haven't gone that far, but they are activists and trying to change this, and so that is. That is sort of that's further down the path from where we are at the moment, and I'm not sure we've got the strength to go that far. But it's definitely something that's should be on everybody's radar.
Interesting.
About how you do this. But so yes, they are. Yeah, I think those two clothing brands are up there. And Guy Watson sleeps on a Naturalmat, of course.
Of course.
Of course he does. Doesn't everyone in Devon?
Sadly, not yet. No, but. Hopefully coming soon. Working on it. But yes, he's so inspirational. You just have to read his newsletter that you get with his veg box.
Doesn't pull any punches, does
there's
he?
always something in it which makes you think, oh, that's either that's anything. Oh yeah, that's so right. And then he's highlighting that something that's oh so wrong at the same time. So yes, he's hugely inspirational.
Wicked Leaks, their publication is just a brilliant read, isn't it? And Jordan, on to you if I may, but some of the businesses that have inspired you.
I think one of my favourite things about the whole B-Corp thing is about discovering new businesses, and some of the, I'll be in the supermarket and I'll pick up a bottle of wine and go, oh, that's a B-Corp, I'll buy that and give it a go, which, it's great. I never would have thought of that would be an important part of my shopping habits, but it's become so. And meeting local B Corps in Bristol, where we're based, there's one that I've just sort of hooked up with called True Start Coffee. So we've moved all of our coffee over to True Start in our offices now, and we've been trying that out. There's recruitment companies. There's all these different businesses that have gone through the B Corp process, and I don't have any sort of specific ones that I would single out beforehand that had necessarily spoken to me. But now that we've gone through it and I've been a part of that, I'm realising how many interesting businesses are out there.
How many other businesses have sort of suffered to go through the process. But I mean, and there's some surprising businesses out there, ones that perhaps people necessarily say, they're going to be B Corp certified. We had Coots Bank here yesterday who've gone through that process, a big establishment financial institution who've seen the value in doing this and demonstrating that they're trying to change and do things differently and in a more purpose-driven way. So, going to open it out to the audience in a couple of minutes. But Catherine, I mean, and indeed all the panelists, it's not perfect, is it? B-Corp. What are the things that you found difficult or frustrating, or is there anything you'd like to see differently done differently? Catherine, if I could start with you.
Yeah, it's certainly not perfect, and I don't think any certification like this is perfect. I think, it's been in the UK since 2015. So like any organisation that is kind of growing quite quickly. So, there are 1,700 B Corps in the UK or companies that are certified B Corp in the UK, which actually is tiny, isn't it? It's growing really quickly. I think that's probably doubled since earlier last year. So, like any organisation, they are sort of struggling to keep up with, I think, the numbers of businesses wanting to certify, but also kind of reassessing standards and things like that. So obviously that's why they've identified they need to review and go through again. And, at the moment, in all honesty, that there aren't the minimum standards in. So you can do really well in one area. You can get a lot of your points in one area. You could really focus in on the environmental side of your business, but actually be still quite poor about how you look after your team. And actually BrewDog was a key example over the last couple of years where that really, quite a toxic culture, but held up as quite a high-scoring B Corp because of lots of other great work they're doing. They're no longer a B Corp, which I have to say, personally, I think that's good for the credibility of the certification. So, lots of challenges, but I think overall there's a lot of momentum and energy out there for businesses to, play their part, do more in terms of not just, lining shareholders' pockets, and we as individuals, as consumers, as employees, we want to buy from and work for businesses that don't just give money to shareholders. So it's only going to get bigger, I think.
Mark,
Yeah.
anything?
Yes,
that you'd like to see
I think
change?
that it is B Lab are fundamentally it's an American.
Came out of California,
came
didn't
out
it?
of California,
10 years ago.
Yeah. And so a lot of the questions are designed around a USA model and a USA culture and a USA structure. And so that would be one criticism from me. Not that I,
Good point. Yeah.
but it's not. They don't have enough cultural adaptation per market, and it would be better. Because sometimes you're trying to answer a question, but you're trying to there's one on healthcare, which is obviously classic for USA because they don't have an NHS, so you score really lowly if you haven't given your employees private healthcare, but they don't understand that in the UK we have the NHS, so actually there is so you're sort of answering it, but you don't get anyway. That's a sort of example of a cultural question, which if there's some adaptation, then it would be more aligned with the market and the companies that are trying to get accreditation within the UK. Same thing, yeah, they are incredibly busy. I mean, I went to this there was this thing that had these things called B socials, and I was talking to this person, and they said, from B Lab, and they said, oh bad luck. Yeah, you just applied at the same time as everybody else, and so it should have been, when you apply, they say, oh, it's going to be like between 3 and 5 months. That's what they said. And then sort of you hear nothing. Literally, it's like you put a letter in the post, and then there's nothing comes back, there's no answer. And so you're sitting there waiting, sort of drumming your fingers, and it's like 3 months before you sort of hear anything back. And then in 3 months they say it's going to be another 3 months, and then it's another 3. And so actually, the process. It took us, it was 12 months, but mainly because they couldn't cope with the volume of applications they were getting. And then they had to outreach to lots of different sort of independent consultants who got employed by B Lab to go through the verification process. So we ended up, the irony was then we ended up having our assessment with a consultant who was sitting in Indonesia, which sort of felt quite strange. But anyway, it's just
classic challenge, I guess.
But
of something
they're growing.
Yeah,
They are growing. They understand it. I think the time limits, the time frames have now come back down again. So I think they're back within the sort of. They said they're back within the sort of 3 to 5 months, which is much more encouraging because as a business you do want to get on with it and you want to know at least you know a time frame and they can keep to that time frame. So it's easier to manage as a business if you know exactly, when you're going to hear things.
Jordan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is a business ultimately, and they are trying to get as many people through the door as possible. And it's great for furthering the cause of sustainability, as many people as possible doing this and spreading the word about it. But there's also that slight dichotomy where it's an exclusive club, and the more people that are in it, does it devalue the mark? Does it, you said about Coots, for example, my initial knee-jerk reaction was, oh, they don't sound like they should be a B Corp. And then you go, well, no, that's great. That's fantastic that they're working towards it. But with these things, do you need that little air of exclusivity in order to preserve the value of it? And I don't know the answer, but it's certainly something that a lot of B Corps and people involved in the B Corp community seem to be wrestling with that I'm speaking to at the moment.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Guys, great discussion. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting to hear all your experience of this. I'd like to open it up to the audience a bit. I know there's some interested B Corpers out there, several. Let's go to the lady in the grey hat and the sunglasses on the left-hand side.
I would, related to Jordan's point actually about elitism, I would love to hear your views, because most B Corps tend to be higher price points. Do you think there's a danger it could become a bit elitist? And do you think more mass market, accessible, lower price point items can ever be good for people and the planet?
Great question. Jordan?
I think it is a great question, and there were certain parts of the process that definitely felt like they were excluding. You have a huge amount of points, for example, for offsetting, which is a very expensive process and not one that everyone can afford to do. And some people would even argue that perhaps it's not the best place for them to invest their money. So yes, you're absolutely right. But I do think there is enough scope at the moment, and I'm not aware of the new sort of rigours that are coming into the process. But at the moment, it seems like there's enough scope for people to be able to navigate that and still benefit from the certification and the process.
Anyone else like to?
I think it's a time thing. We're all quite early in this thing. 5 years. As Catherine said, in 1999, no one knew what the word organic was. Okay, we're 24 years later. Everybody understands, what that stands for, and things do filter down. It starts as a very exclusive club. Starts like, what is it, Planet Organic on Westbourne Grove. The only place was, so one of the most expensive retail parts of London. That's only been doing organic vegetables. Now you can buy them. I'm sure every single supermarket out there is selling an organic tomato now. So things will filter down over time. Things start off as an exclusive club. The club just gets bigger, I think. So I think yes, it is at the moment, but I think it won't be in time.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a great question actually, because I agree with you to some extent that at the moment it does tend to be the sort of higher end businesses, and ultimately I guess consumers who are more interested in sustainability tend to be that demographic, don't they? So there's that happening. But totally agree that I think almost success would look like there was no need for a certification, because actually it's all it's all about impact, isn't it? And people running businesses and in a much more sustainable way. That there's been criticism over some of the bigger multinationals, Danone, who I spent a bit of my career at actually, who are a B Corp now, and there's differing views as to kind of, that doesn't, big multinational, B Corp, but ultimately they've got the power to have a lot of impact. They are high impact business, dairy business. So, for me, isn't it good that they are looking diligently at their business and trying to work out how to do it in a more sustainable way? So Nespresso, that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's these kind of tensions, aren't there, that I think are really, really interesting, and it'll be good to see how it goes.
Thanks. Great question. Edward in the hat there.
Thank you very much. One observation first. It's quite nice to know that the family behind the creation of Stourhead the family business has become a B Corp. But separately, do we think that B Corp members would view the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as the most important plans for the planet?
Thank you. Anyone like to take that one?
I think everything in the B Corp process is tied to the SDGs, and that's sort of baked in to the whole process. So you can't be aware of one without the other, really. But there's always a bit of a difficulty when you set goals, and that's one thing. But then saying these are the goals, off you go. You still have to be working towards those goals and be putting in frameworks to help people achieve those goals. So while they're a great starting point, I wouldn't say that they're anywhere near the be-all and end-all personally.
Yeah, but I think B Labs certainly do put a lot of weight behind the SDGs. So actually, a lot of the questions on the impact assessment, when you sort of click into the guidance, they direct you to the relevant sustainable development goal. Which is sometimes useful, and sometimes actually they're just a bit too broad. But certainly B Lab are working, I guess, in an aligned way with the SDGs.
Thanks, guys. More questions? Lady at the back with the sunglasses.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, a bit more of a practical question. Is there a threshold, either in terms of size or turnover, that a company needs to have reached to be able to apply to be a B Corp?
No, there is no threshold in that sense. So you need to have been operating for 1 year, and their definition of operating is that one person needs to be working for a minimum of 35 hours a week on the business. So that's the only kind of threshold, if you like. In terms of number, if you're a business that doesn't yet have any employees, so you're really early stage, then yes, you can still be a B Corp. You just won't get all of the questions in the employee section. So the points will be sort of prorated across all the other sections.
So in some ways, that's a benefit to do it sooner.
Yeah, I think there is some benefit actually to doing it in that stage. Actually, where it can become difficult, I think, is when you decide to go for a B Corp when you've only got 1, 2 or 3 employees, because of course, by the very nature of the fact that you've only just started employing, you're not going to have all of those policies and practices ready yet. That said, of course, it gives you a great suite of brilliant best practices to initiate, but it just means that your point score will probably be quite low if you've only just started employing.
Thank you.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is that if you're doing it in your very, very small business, you might not do any business. You'll spend all your time doing.
You need a sustainable business
doing B Corp, doing the B Corp paperwork. So yeah, think about the business as well as the B Corp at the same time.
It's a really good point, and that's something we've experienced definitely. As a small team running events, where do you find the time to put into this? Which is, we totally recognise the importance of it, but it's just finding that time.
Yeah, and I think you are so many people that I talk to who are on the journey. They say, "Oh, yeah, I must get back to it.
There's always something else.
I must get back to it.
Yeah.
I must get back to it." They've done some of it, and then it stalls because the telephone rings and they're really busy. Something else is going on.
But there are an emerging, and I guess Catherine sort of in many ways at the forefront of this. Is an emerging group of people, and Fran Page indeed in the audience here today who's helping us, but who are actually coming into this space to facilitate this, recognising that there are lots of businesses that want this support and want to go through this process, but need some help doing it, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's massively time consuming, isn't it? And I guess also just a little bit of the interpretation of what they're actually asking. To your point, it's quite American. Some of the terminology is quite corporate, and how to interpret that into your own business's context can be challenging.
Yes, I mean, and just you do need to have. Just the employee things. You almost need to have worked in HR really to understand everything that they are, that is required of you. So,
but it is a process at the end of the day, and I wouldn't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yep.
You can embark on the process and improve your business as you go. Yes, it's great to finally get that logo and be able to put it on all your socials and things. But actually, a lot of the best things that come of it come through doing it and trying to implement those things. So there's no reason why anyone can't get started now, and certification will come when it comes.
Great point.
Yeah.
I'd just be interested to ask the audience a question, actually, and we'll come back to you in 1 second, if we may. But how many of you guys would actually make the choice when you're in the supermarket or your local farm shop or wherever you may be? But do you actually look out for that certification? Show of hands, who actually does?
Who knows about certification?
Sorry?
I think you should ask a different question of who knows what B-Corp was.
Well, in that case, who knows what B-Corp was? So I think I might have already, I was guessing that if you'd come to this talk, you might have done already. But okay, so and lady here, you had another question.
Mark, what do you see as a UK-based manufacturer as your biggest challenge going forward?
Oh, golly. I mean, probably, we live in very uncertain times, really. And it's very difficult, I think, trying to predict now what's going to happen 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road becomes increasingly difficult. And so that certainty of that things will happen and things will, it's not, we live in pretty uncertain times. So I think, unpredictability is the sort of biggest enemy. And, for us as a business, we make beds and mattresses, and traditionally that's driven by the housing market. And the housing market, is not in a great shape. So traditionally you'll buy your new sofa and you'll buy your new bed when you move house. If people aren't moving houses, then that is a danger and that is a worry. So, everybody's worried that the world's going to fall off a cliff tomorrow, and in the last sort of 6 months, it seems to have happened a couple of times. So I think it's quite hard to predict, really. So I don't know what advice I can give you about that, but try and have a really shiny crystal ball, polish it as much as you possibly can. But yeah.
Uncertain times, but I think hopefully from seeing the businesses that are here and listening to the guys on the panel here today, a sense of optimism as well, that there are a lot of people working really, really hard in the business community to really make positive change. Any other questions before I wrap it up? Just one more from the gentleman here.
I'd never heard of it before. How can offsetting be ever a part of it?
That's a great question. It's not something a lot of people are increasingly uncomfortable with offsetting, Jordan. That's fair to say, isn't it?
For a long time, I was a huge offsetting cynic. It was my last bastion of I'm going to get as many B-Corp points as possible without doing this because I don't believe in it. And I understand everybody's sort of concerns about it, really. But we ended up in a position where we were facing down, possibly after a very long road, not being able to certify because of losing a couple of points at the last minute and some other things. But we sort of looked at it and went, well, they're offering us 5 points, which is a huge amount in B Corp terms to do this. So let's see if there is a way to do it sort of with as much integrity as possible, I guess.
So you have to accept that some businesses can't comply?
Yeah, of course. And I think, it's not a requirement by any means. But in the process of looking at it, there are a lot of businesses out there now that are doing better to provide ways of offsetting that are more ethical and more transparent. There's still a long way to go with it. And obviously on the initial concept of carbon credits are quite, charged, but there's things out there you can invest in lots of different things now that still qualify you as offsetting in some way or other. So I wouldn't write it off completely.
I think for me, what I'm hoping that they do with these new standards, because I have my own opinion about offsetting. I think B Corp, you kind of as a business, you have to see it as a journey. You have to see. So when you first certify, there'll be things that you were just not in a position to be able to do at that point. It might be things that are going to cost you a lot of money, are just not the right things at that time. But what it also does is it gives you this kind of roadmap for future improvement. So B Corps have to recertify every 3 years. So you have to go back through that impact assessment. And of course, for most businesses, they want to improve their score. It's a great marketing story, isn't it? So actually in looking for those opportunities to get a better score and improve, then, for example, you might say, do you know what, we've got to offset right now, but our plan is, we've set ourselves some carbon targets, and within 3 years we're going to have hit X. So it's about part of that mix and part of that journey.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. I'm afraid we have run out of time, and we've almost run out of time indeed for Planted Country. There's only 1 hour left of this event. That's the last talk in this Planted Unearthed series. I'm incredibly grateful for all of you being here today, all the businesses that we've been partnering with for this event, notably obviously PYTCH and Naturalmat, our old friends from Naturalmat. And to Catherine Coward, indeed, thank you so much for your contribution today. Guys, that just leaves it to me to thank our brilliant panellists. Thanks to our talk sponsor, PYTCH, and Jordan, all the work your team and the SolCell guys have done throughout this event, and indeed events of the future. I hope to make this all the AV that's been powered here completely off-grid and renewable. Thanks also to Solid Wool Chairs for providing these woolen chairs. Would you believe what can be made of a truly sustainable material, which obviously Mark's guys work closely as well. If you've enjoyed this talk, please visit planted-community.co.uk for more information about renting our cabin, as well as more great articles, interviews and features about the issues we've discussed on this talk. In the meantime, please enjoy the rest of the event. Take time to speak to some of the environmentally focused businesses and organisations who've partnered with Planted as we attempt to reconnect people and places with nature. Thanks to everyone for watching. My name's Sam Peters, and this has been Cool Design, Sustainable Futures. Thank you.